Welcome back to ICC. It's round 2 and things are already heating up in Budapest. In today's round, many of the top guns made their Olympiad 2024 debut. China played world champion Ding Liren, and India also featured world championship challenger Gukesh in their own lineup. However, one name was still missing. It was Magnus Carlsen. Norway decided to preserve their lineup from yesterday and kept Johann Sebastian Christiansen on board 1. That decision didn't seem to work out though, as Team Norway only managed to tie their match versus lower-rated Team Canada. In other matches of the day, the Czech Republic couldn't break through the defenses of the young Mongolian team, and Greece also tied their match versus Venezuela. The rest of the top teams cruised to convincing victories, even though if many of them were with a result 3-1 compared to yesterday's 4-0. Let's start with the games. The first game I want to focus on is Fabiano Caruana versus Team Jingyao from the USA versus Singapore match. The star-studded American team won convincingly with 4-0, but it wasn't as easy as it seemed. Let's take a look. In this position, Fabi has just played the move c5. The idea here is to play b6 next, and once the queens are off the board, after queen takes f5 for example, the b7 pawn would be weak for the rest of the game. Here, this move already proved to be too much for Fabi's opponent, as Team Jingyao played the move c takes b5. But before we see what followed in the game, let's check out what is the engine's best suggestion. According to Stockfish, Black should play bishop b8 instead, immediately getting the bishop out to a more active diagonal. A game could have continued with queen takes f5, knight takes f5, b6. Again, it's this idea that we talked about the b7 weakness. Knight f5 would be next. Bishop takes e5, rook takes e5, takes, rook d5. We don't want to lose a tempo, so bishop takes f6, g takes f6. And in this position, white should have the advantage. Again, it all revolves around the b7 pawn. But here, as black's rook on d5 is very active, we want to get rid of it first before we focus on pawn grabbing. That's why the best move in the position is rook takes a2. The idea is to go rook d2 and simply exchange the rook. There's a nice tactic that could occur in this position. Let's say if black wanted to exchange the knights in order to make the protection at b7 easier. After knight d4, there's the fantastic move, rook d2, simply leaving the knight out in the open. If knight takes b3 followed, after rook d5, c takes d5, c6, b takes c6, b7, white would promote the pawn and be up a queen. Therefore, this wouldn't be very desirable for black. Anyway, this shouldn't have happened necessarily, and bishop b8 is still black's best try and the toughest defense. Let's see what happened in the game though. After c takes b5, Fabi played the move queen b7, taking a pawn and attacking the bishop on a7. From here on, he should have seen a fantastic variation to evaluate all the complications. His opponent followed up with queen c2, knight to d4. Notice how everything is hanging in this position. White has to be precise, otherwise he would lose his advantage. So there we go. Knight d4, queen takes c5, knight takes e6, queen f2, king h1, f takes e6, and queen e7. So in this position, white is a full rook up. That's why black played the move rook d2, as it is essentially a double attack. Black threatens mate on g2, as well as taking the bishop on b2, partially regaining some material. There is one big flaw in this plan though. It is actually white who gets to the black king first. So the game continued with queen f7 check, king h8, knight g6. Notice how everything comes up with check. All the regrouping of white's forces comes with tempos, as white doesn't want to lose any moves. So knight g6, king h7, knight f8, king h8, queen g6, simply defending against mate. Rook takes b2. Black is now only an exchange down, but he already faces more serious problems, as knight e6, threatening checkmate on g7, is pretty much a devastating threat. In the game, Team Jingyao played the move knight h5, defending against mate on g7 and preparing one last trick. If white is not careful here, black would follow up with the move knight g3, breaking the connection between the queen and the g2 pawn, and after that, after the check, he would take on g2 with mate. However, he didn't take into account that white can defend with checks. So Fabi played the move queen e8, king h7, and after knight g5, black actually resigned. The reason for that is after the only move in the position, h takes g5, white can capture the knight on h5 with a check. So black would be forced to move the king, and after king g8, white can continue with the move rook e8. Now, the only save from checkmate would be to play queen f8. But after that, well, black is down the full queen and can't expect much from the rest of the game, right? So to sum up this game, I just want to say this was an impressive calculation by Fabiano Caruana. He just took the chance and he never looked back. So congrats to him, and now let's focus on other games from the round. Another game I want to spend some time on today is from the match Iceland versus India, where Stefansson played against World Championship challenger Gukesh. Let's take a look. So here, in this position, Gukesh has just played the move queen h5, continuing his attack on the king's side. So if we want to give checkmate, we definitely need a queen, and that's precisely what he did. His opponent responded with queen d2, which unfortunately proved to be a decisive mistake. The problem with the move is that now black can go for g3, further opening up the g file and creating more trouble for the white king. After f takes g3, rook takes g3, black has a very real threat of simply capturing rook g2 and continuing with bishop e4. Let's say, just for the sake of beauty, white plays the move knight c1. There, we would have a beautiful combination continuing with rook takes g2, rook takes g2, bishop e4, pinning the rook, rook g1, and here there's a fantastic tactical shot, knight takes f4. The problem is that if white recaptures e takes f4, after bishop f4, there isn't a good response. If white simply moves the queen away, let's say queen e2, then queen h2 would be made as the rook on g2 is pinned. So taking the queen on h2 is impossible. And the problem with queen takes f4, the other option, is that after bishop g2, rook g2, queen d1, this would be pretty much forced checkmate. Queen f1 takes, rook g1, and it's game over. To defend from this trick, the Icelandic GM played the move e4 in this position, but it was simply too late to make a difference. The game continued with rook g4, threatening to go rook h4 and capture the pawn on h2 with mate. Queen e2, simply knight f4, why not take a free pawn? Takes, takes. And now we're again piling on the h2 pawn. White thought maybe they could win material with bishop f3, but this move doesn't work due to a deflection. So Gukesh captured the bishop and white simply resigned. The problem was that if white takes on f3 immediately, there's queen h2 with mate, and if instead he takes on g4 first, then the queen would be defending the rook on f3, so he would still be down a piece. In this game, I was very impressed by the way the challenger navigated the dynamics of this position. He realized that he couldn't sit at one place and just wait for his opponent to organize his pieces. So he started playing very actively with g5, bringing each and every piece to the attack on the king side, and it worked out fabulously. Another game that I want to show for a second is Alexei Shirov's from his match against Bosnia. So here, his Bosnian IM opponent played the move queen c3 and resigned. So the problem with this position was that white's king is completely safe, even though it is out in the open. The game would have probably continued with king f4, and now it's a big struggle to find a move for black that doesn't lose on the spot. For example, queen c7 runs into rook h8, king g7, rook h7 with mate, and any other empty move, because, well, let's be honest, black doesn't have any checks, and there isn't any other useful move anyway. So if bishop e6 or something like that, there is rook h8, king g7, rook h7, king g8, and now after the move g4, preparing king g5, there is simply not response for black. Anything he plays would end up in a disaster. If like queen b2 is some desperate attempt to give a check on f2, there's king g5 and the king is perfectly safe. With such dominance on the h-file and a pawn all the way up to c7, it will be a matter of time when white wins the game. So this was just to pay tribute to a fantastic attacking player such as Alexei Shirov. I thought this was a very pretty final endgame, and I thought it deserved to be shown. But with that remark, let's jump into the women's section. It was another good day for the favorites in the women's section, as all of them managed to win their matches. However, some of the top teams kept their fans at the edge of their seats, as they only managed to score narrow victories with 2.5, 1.5 score. One such example was Ukraine versus Lithuania, where team leader Yulia Osmak blundered her advantage away to give the full point to Lithuania's Olena Martinkova. Another such instance was the match Kazakhstan versus Finland, where the higher-rated Kazakh girls outlasted their opponents for a 2.5, 1.5 victory. Still, in the rest of the day, there were plenty of success stories, and we're going to begin our overview of the women's section with Team USA's Alice Lee convincing victory. Even though Alice Lee is already an experienced player and she even has individual gold medal from the women's world teams, this was her first game at the Olympiad. Let's see how it went. Here, Alice Lee is playing white versus Philippines' Jean-Jodeline Fronda. The Philippine girl just played the move b5, going for the Banco Gambit, and Alice responded with knight d2. Now you have to know that even though Alice is a gifted tactician, she's a more positional player by nature. So she didn't want to go for the pawn sacrifice. Queen a5, pinning the knight in order to be able to take b takes c4. Queen c2, b takes c4, e4, d6. So far this is just normal moves. Bishop c4, g6, knight e2, bishop g7, castle, castle. And both sides are pretty much trying to finish their development. White went for the move b3. And here, black played the move queen c7. Some of you might wonder why black didn't go for tactics such as knight e4, for example, as this would open up the black bishop's way to the rook on a1, but this simply doesn't work. After knight takes c4, bishop take a1, bishop d2, white would also capture the bishop on a1, and she would have material advantage. For this reason, black played the move queen c7, moving her queen away and preparing to go for knight e4. Now bishop b2, a5. In this position, black is heavily restricted in her actions because she simply doesn't have enough squares for her pieces. Now, when that is the case, you often want to trade some minor pieces, and that's the idea of a5. Maybe play bishop a6 next, and in the future, maybe even push the pawn to a4, trying to create some counterplay. The game continued with h3, a normal prophylaxis move. Bishop a6, f4. Alice is ready to start an attack. She has more space and she has no reason to hold back. Queen b7, rook b1. All of those is just some slight maneuvering. White is trying to slightly improve her pieces. Knight d7, bishop c3, queen c7. As you can tell, black still has the same problems. Her pieces are passive, and what is even worse, there isn't much perspective for them in the future either. Queen d3, trying to force black to make a decision about her a6 bishop. Bishop b7, a4. You can see that white is completely dominating this game, having control over the entire board, the queen side, the center, the king side. It is all under Alice Lee's control. Rook d8, and here Alice decided it was fireworks time, so she went for g4. This is a common practice when you already control the center and you're trying to launch an attack on one of the sides. So g4 is not even weakening, it's just grabbing space, and it's preparing the move like g5 and f5 in the future. Knight b6, rook f2, queen c8, bishop b5. White has nothing to hurry about. Again, she just controls everything, so she will wait for the most opportune moment to deliver her blow. e6, trying to open up the center, maybe activate this bishop, find it a better diagonal. But it's again a little bit too late. white has all the control. And the knight c4 is actually a fascinating idea. It takes advantage of the fact that the knight on b6 is unprotected, so it is indirectly defending the d5 pawn, because after the capture, white can simply take back with the bishop. So queen c7, knight takes b6, queen takes b6, and g5, getting rid of the main defender of the black king. And here, black took a decision that's a bit incomprehensible to me. She captured the pawn on d5, trying to gain some more space in exchange for the sacrifice piece, but this was simply not a viable option. The best was just to go knight h5 and hang in tight, waiting for better chances. As here, after bishop takes g7, knight takes g7, f5, e takes d5, e takes d5, and bishop a6, sorry. Black's position is actually not so bad. It looks pretty scary and annoying, but there aren't that many pieces left on the board, and even though white will keep pressing, this wouldn't be an issue of checkmate, whether black will survive anymore. So the game would certainly not be over here. But instead, what the game saw with e takes d5, there was no compensation for the piece after g takes f6, d takes e4, queen g3, because white is a piece up, and the black king is still in danger. That is still a very, very real threat. So the game continued with f5, putting pressure on the g6 spot. Next, the knight will come into play as well, and the black king will have some tough days ahead. So d5. F takes g6, h takes g6, knight f4, preparing to take on g6 maybe at some point, queen c7, guarding against that idea obviously, queen g5, king h7. It looks like temporarily black has defended everything, and that maybe d4 and e3 would be annoying for white. But that is simply not the case. After queen h4 check, white's attack is irresistible. Black's only move is bishop h6, trying to put something on the way of the white queen. But here Alice found the cleanest way to finish the game. She played the move knight e6, which at first glance might seem a bit strange, but the idea is that by moving the knight away, she opens the diagonal for her bishop, and bishop d2 would come next. So the game saw f takes e6, bishop d2, queen f7, and black resigned, not even waiting for white to capture on h6. The attack is simply way too strong. Either capture here wins convincingly for white. Maybe bishop takes h6 is even stronger, as the threat would be bishop g7 and queen h8 on the next move. But in any case, it was a super smooth victory for Alice Lee in her typical style, controlling the entire board, taking control of the queen side, of the center, and then delivering a decisive blow with a beautiful tactic. So we'll definitely keep watching out for Alice Lee, and her game actually concludes our recap of the day. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next videos.